Hello, welcome to the next 6 months. It's me again, and of course, more importantly, Mark Thomas, business strategist, author of 99%. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm very well, thank you, Peter.
Well, I thought we might catch up with a little bit of news. There's not a lot of it around at the moment. This has caught my eye in the past day or two. This, as you can see from Daily Mail, it's scary stuff. I think the key word is scary. The Chancellor, who is Rishi Sunak, you can see him there, is telling us basically that we've paid out a fortune, or he has, for Covid, and an estimated 40 billion a year will need to be generated in tax rises, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies and the Resolution Foundation. That all sounds terribly official, and it sounds like we've got to be tightening our belts.
Well, yes, I agree with you. Scary is the important word there, because it's a very, very irresponsible word to be using at a time like this. So you remember we talked before about the state of UK debt and how alarmist people were being, and the fact that in fact our debt is just about average for the last 300 years. So there are some grains of truth in what he said. It is true that our debt is higher than it was before, but it's not true that that's unusual in terms of our history, and it's not true that it's unusual in comparison with other countries. It's perfectly normal debt. So using a word like scary is fueling what I call debt hysteria, and I see you've got a lovely picture of a hysterical that you may think that's a well-known Norwegian painting, but in fact that's an image of our Chancellor of the Exchequer trying to take a balanced view of the state of the nation's finances.
So what I've learned from you over the past few days is that there is a lot of emotion in this. There is a lot of scare talk. And behind that, there seems to be a political agenda.
Well, I think that's right. I cannot believe that Rishi Sunak doesn't understand that since 1931, the UK has been running a fiat currency, that he doesn't understand that our debt is roughly at the 300-year average level. I can't believe that he doesn't understand that our borrowing costs are extraordinarily low at the moment. So I've just had a look before I came on here, and if he wants to borrow money, 1 year money in the market, he would be paid for it. He would pay a negative interest rate on 1 year money.
I'm going to get on the
well,
Rishi, you need to be listening to this.
It is unusual to have negative interest rates. Even if he wanted to borrow 30-year money, he could fill his boots with 30-year money at less than 1% per annum, 1% interest rate. So, we have absolutely not got a problem borrowing. Borrowing is historically very, very cheap at the moment. This whole idea that debt is something to panic about, he cannot be so ignorant that he doesn't understand that.
He's not ignorant. He's not ignorant. He's another Goldman Sachs guy, and apparently no Western government can operate without Goldman Sachs people right at the top. He knows what he's doing, doesn't he?
So I think he knows exactly what he's doing, and therefore I think he knows exactly what he's doing when he uses a word like scary. And I think that this whole debt hysteria, which is repeatedly using words like scary, insolvent, Armageddon, crisis, all of these scary sounding words, they are used to soften us up so that when they then turn around in a year's time or 2 years' time and say, look, I'm terribly sorry, but we all knew this was coming. Somebody's got to be the adult in the room and take the difficult decisions. Now it's time for another round of austerity. We all nod and say, well, yes, I suppose
we just got to tighten our belts a little bit more. Something I am a little bit scared by, I saw in the Guardian a day or two ago, and it's this piece by George Monbiot, the British government's first disaster of 2021, a food shortage. This seems to be quite well argued, actually. I mean, basically saying that we import 60% of our fresh food. And because of Brexit, which we're going to discuss in a moment, supplies are going to be threatened, basically. Anything from 20 to 40% disruption through the ports. That could reduce us quite a lot in terms of, I mean, there are no food stocks. Obviously, you can't really keep food stocks in any case of fresh food. But he also makes an interesting point that whereas the government feels that its duty and responsibility to have apparently 90 days of oil supplies in reserve, it doesn't actually feel it's got a legal or moral obligation to have any food stocks. It leaves that completely to the market. So I do rather wonder what's going to happen. Let's talk a bit about the impact of Brexit. How do you feel things are at the moment? What's the state of play?
Well, nobody understands what the state of play is because the whole process is far from transparent. But what is very, very clear is that there's a real possibility of no deal Brexit, which the Leave campaign explicitly promised wasn't on the cards. They were very, very clear before the vote happened. They told people that all this talk of having to leave the single market, that was fear-mongering, that was Project Fear, that shouldn't be taken seriously. And, Brexit would free us up, but of course we would still enjoy all the benefits of being in the single market. Now, if that had been true, then the things that you've just mentioned wouldn't be about to happen.
We wouldn't even be thinking about that. Yeah.
We wouldn't be thinking about it because they wouldn't be on the cards. But in fact, they are very much on the cards. And I think whether we have a no-deal Brexit or some kind of deal that's cobbled together in the last few days of this year, we're going to have that kind of massive disruption.
Yeah. So it's easy to forget, actually. And we've been told so many lies, actually. We've been lied to repeatedly, and I think it's a bit like somebody in an abusive relationship. You tend to forget eventually, what you've been told. What's the latest lie? But you're right. I mean, there was absolutely no question of us leaving the single market. We've got a couple of tweets here. Let me play this one first of all. Tell us who this character is, please.
Well, this is Daniel Hannan, who was one of the founders and one of the most senior players in the Leave campaign. He's been campaigning for years to get Britain out of the EU.
Okay, well, let's see what this character was promising us.
No one is prejudicing the cross-channel trade. I mean, Norway, Switzerland, all of these countries have complete free trade with the EU. And by the way, I can't help noticing that they're doing pretty well. But to repeat, absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market. Yeah, but nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market. No one is prejudicing the cross-channel trade. I mean, Norway, Switzerland, all of these countries have complete free...
This is depressing stuff.
As you say, he kept repeating that same line, didn't he? And he was by far from the only one. Nigel Farage said the same thing very, very explicitly. They were all banging on about.
Well, actually, the British Prime Minister was too. Here's an example.
Yeah, he did too.
Here we are.
We not only we will remain a paid up, valued, participating member of the single market, and there is under no circumstances, in my view, will a British government adjust that position. We will remain a.
This is disturbing. This is very disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
It's not funny. It sounds like a comedy routine, but you're dealing with millions of people's lives here, and you're dealing with somebody who should have the vestiges of some moral authority. And to lie like that, I find it very disturbing. Very disturbing.
It's extremely disturbing, and the fact is, because those things were said, as we've just heard, very explicitly by very senior people, and they were repeated time and time again. Anybody who voted Leave believed that that's what they were going to get. They were going to get uninterrupted access to the single market, and the talk of disruption at the ports, that was Project Fear. And some of them, I think, still believe that it was all just Project Fear because they were told that so many times by so many senior people, and it reassured them, and they still think it's all Project Fear. And that is, I think you're right, it's very, very disturbing. And of course, the reality is that these things are very, very complex. Actually, we're not going to be in the single market. Whether we have a deal or not, we're not going to be inside the single market anymore. We're not going to have a customs union anymore. So there will have to be customs transactions, and we haven't got the systems up and running. The Hauliers Association has said, we still don't know what we're planning for. Government keeps saying it takes longer than you think, get ready, but they haven't told anyone what to get ready for because we don't know whether there's going to be a deal or not. So precisely what we'll be ready for, we just don't know. The HMRC hasn't got the systems up and running. There really is a very serious likelihood of a logistical nightmare. And as you say, that will have a profound effect on fresh food and also possibly on certain medicines. So
I think we've been misled. I think a lot of people voted Brexit as a protest vote. I think a lot of people wanted more participative democracy. They didn't want faceless bureaucrats in Europe taking decisions. They wanted to bring decision making back to the grassroots. That clearly is not happening either. We're having a regime now that is breaking international law and in many ways is being more remote than ever. Let's just look for a moment how this first started. I've done a bit of digging, Mark, and I've found a video here that was on YouTube as part of a Marketing Society's conference. Nothing really very spectacular, except it featured a keynote speaker called Dominic Cummings, who was rather pleased with himself. And this is how Brexit first happened, according to Mr. Cummings.
Summer 2015, I was sitting at home, happily unemployed, in the garden, having a beer, reading, and I started to get phone calls from a combination of a few MPs and some campaigners and a few Tory party donor billionaires.
Okay, so that bears a little bit of pondering. A few Tory party billionaires injected enormous amounts of money, enormous amounts of know-how, behavioural science, data mining, all the rest of it, to influence the future policy of this country in a way that hasn't been changed for over 100 years, with consequences that could be extraordinary and dire. The question I've got for you, Mark, because you seem to be able to answer absolutely everything, the question is, who are these faceless billionaires, and why did they do it? Were they operating out of the goodness of their hearts, or was there something in it for them?
I probably shouldn't name their names because it's not that expensive to take a contract out on
they'll
somebody.
Kill you. They'll kill you. Yeah, all right.
They could easily afford it. So I won't name their names. You can find some of the names without too much effort if you dig around, but best if I don't do that.
All right.
But your second question, I think, is really the vital one, which is what's in it for them. And I think the answer is, unfortunately, two very different things, both of which are quite scary. So the first thing is that a lot of them ran hedge funds.
Okay.
And, of course, still do run hedge funds. And a hedge fund is a type of investment vehicle that aims to be able to profit from all kinds of movements in asset prices. So normally, if you invest your money in shares, you think, well, I'm taking a bet that these shares are going to go up over time, so I'll buy them and I'll hold them for a while, and when I sell them, they'll be worth more. That's what most people think of as investment, and indeed,
Sure.
That is mostly what investment is. Hedge funds also profit from prices falling. So you can profit from a falling price either by doing what's called selling short, you may have heard of that phrase, or by buying an option which will go into the money if the price falls. So there are two kinds of option. One is like a bet on a rise, the other is like a bet on a fall. So they've got two distinct ways they can profit from asset prices falling. So if they know there's going to be a big event coming and that it's going to move asset prices either up or down, if they know what's coming ahead of the rest of the market, they can make a killing. And some of them have made killings on some of these things, and some of them have been betting very heavily against the kinds of companies they know will suffer, like car companies, pharmaceutical companies, other financial services companies even. A lot of those will struggle if we have a hard Brexit. So there's a short-term game that they're playing, which is that within a 12-month period, they can make a huge return on their money if some of this short selling performs well. And in particular, that works very well if you can control the news flow. So Bloomberg did an investigation at the time of the announcement of the vote. And what their investigation suggested was, I don't know if you recall, Nigel Farage went on television and said, well, it was a close run campaign, but it looks as though Remain has probably edged it. So in other words, there was news going out there which suggested that Remain had won, even though by that stage, private polling conducted by the hedge funds themselves meant that the hedge funds knew that. Now, according to Bloomberg, Farage probably knew that at the time that he made the speech.
Wow.
In other words, that speech was probably there to help move the markets in such a way that the hedge funds could make an even bigger killing. That is extraordinary, and it's surprising that it hasn't been more highlighted than, as far as I'm aware, actually, apart from that Bloomberg report, there hasn't been that much in the mainstream media about it.
Talk about the Big Short. I mean, that's nothing compared to this.
No, that's nothing really compared with this, because they weren't actively manipulating the events in the world in order to create the opportunity for that Big Short. They were simply profiting from them. So that's the first thing. The second thing is even more nefarious, which is that if we have a hard Brexit, it produces chaos, and chaos is an opportunity to introduce all manner of changes, and in particular, the kind of change that the market fundamentalists that we talked about the other day would like to introduce. The unwinding of the welfare state, the dismantling of the NHS, all of that becomes much easier to do if you've got a situation of chaos and turmoil, and then you can use this myth of unaffordability again. And it's very, very plausible. Yes, it's been fantastic that we were able to do this for 70 years, but, we're in a different world now, and we've got to learn to live within our means now. And I'm sorry, but we're all in it together. We're all going to have to suffer, and that will include the NHS, and that will include benefits claimants. They're all going to have to help bear the burden of this. So in other words, a complete unwinding of the post-war social contract. Two answers to your question, what's in it for them? One is short-term gains. The other one is reshaping society in the way we want to see it.
Yes.
And when they talked about taking back control, ask yourself, did they mean they wanted you to be in control? Did they even mean they wanted UK Parliament to be in control? Or did they mean they wanted themselves to be in control? It's clear it was the latter. They've taken a lot of pains to stop Parliament from interfering in what's going on. Even now, the Internal Market Bill seeks to exempt itself from all kinds of review. It's taking back control for a very tiny group of people.
Yeah. Wow. I've got to say, Mark, the scales are falling from my eyes. Very revelatory show today. Please spread the word. You know how to do it. It's easy to do it. If you want to leave a question for Mark, just do it right here on YouTube. And meanwhile, we will be back with you tomorrow.